You're listening to Cosmic Cousins Soul-Centered Astrology. For grounding that ass from all the New Age sass. I am your host, Jeff Henshaw. Cosmic Cousins is a new and full moon podcast ritual, and it is dedicated to honoring the interconnectedness of our universal family through embodied health, self-discovery, and deeper learning. Hey, Cosmic Cousins. Happy total solar eclipse, Sagittarius new moon portal to you. That's a lot. Total solar eclipse, Sagittarius new moon at the 23rd degree of Sagittarius, Monday, December 14th, 2020 at 8:16 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So Monday morning, and here I am, I'm in Portland. It is rainy. I have my blinds shut tight because this is the solar eclipse. This is a time to go within. So we're going to talk about the invitation of this potent Saturn, or Sagittarius new moon eclipse today on the show. We're going to connect with the Sagittarian cards. We have the Queen of Wands here, which is mutable fire. Temperance, which is Sagittarius' soul growth. And the Wheel of Fortune, which is the representation of Jupiter, which is Sagittarius' ruling planet. So if you're new to the show, welcome. My name is Jeff Henshaw. I am an astrologer. I also work with the tarot. I like to build a bridge between these two practices. And I think I'm bringing attention to that today because Sagittarius is the sign of building bridges between different practices, different philosophies, different religions of the world. And it is through that building of bridges that together we create an expansive future that is in alignment with the evolution of this planet. So for me, I'm an Aquarius sun, Aquarius rising, but my two ruling planets, my traditional ruler Saturn and my modern ruler Uranus, are both in the sign of Sagittarius. So this is a big sign for me, but this is an opportunity for you during the Sagittarius new moon to really connect with the parts of your birth chart that are Sagittarian. So if you're a Sagittarius sun, happy solar return to you. Happy birthday. Sagittarius moon, this is deeply internal time for you. A deep psychic and emotional realignment. And if you're a Sagittarius rising, you're likely receiving a lot of insights right now into the ways that you are expanding and the potential that you hold. So it's big. This is big for us here, Sagittarius new moon. And before we just dive into this episode, I would like to make a few announcements. The first one is that we have the huge Saturn-Jupiter conjunction called the Great Conjunction in Aquarius taking place this week. So we're going to talk about that on this episode to be sure. We also have a special interview conversation with Lars Mellis, who is a professional astrologer based in West Hollywood, California. Lars is a dear friend to me and is really, really knowledgeable and also hilarious. We talk about living your truth. We talk about the Galactic Center, Sagittarius and the unconscious mind, understanding detriments. Lars has Mercury in Sagittarius, which is Mercury in detriment. I have Mercury in Pisces, which is also Mercury in detriment. So we create some dialogue around understanding detriments. Lars talks to us about taking the scare out of squares. And then particularly Sagittarius squares Virgo and Pisces. And so we look at that. Lars talks about working as a gay astrologer. We talk about the Jupiter and Saturn and Aquarius conjunction, the Sagittarius solar eclipse that we're in. We talk more deeply about that, and astrology and Pokemon. So it is a very enlivening conversation, and if any of these themes speak to you, if you're interested in them, I encourage you to stick around for the latter half of this episode for that conversation with Lars, who is a Sagittarius sun with Sagittarius moon. Updates from me. Again, we are on the precipice of some radical shifts and changes, with both Saturn and Jupiter shifting into Aquarius later on this week. As an Aquarius sun rising, I am feeling really excited and inspired by this transit, and so I'm making use of this energy in the new year by shifting my focus toward writing. I have the hopes of finishing and publishing 2 new books in 2021, and because of this, I am unfortunately unable to offer mentorships or courses in the new year. And I know this may be disappointing to quite a number of you who I've been in communication with about this potential of working in mentorship. And I do hope you understand. But at this time, I have to shift my focus towards where I'm being called and inspired at this time. I do plan to continue to release this podcast so I can offer you support. And of course, I'll still be offering both astrology and tarot readings. If you're hoping to dive deep and to work with me, you can go to cosmiccousins.com and book yourself a reading. If you've already had a reading with me and you want to work with me more regularly, if you were interested in a mentorship, I do encourage you to book follow-up readings, and perhaps we can continue to create dialogue in that way. If a reading doesn't call to you right now and you do value the time and energy I put into this podcast and into my newsletter, please consider becoming a Patreon member for the show. You can donate as little as $1 per month, and this helps support me as I continue to offer this work to you and the community free of charge. If that's not available to you at this time, you could leave an iTunes review. You could also purchase a workshop download. And either way, if not, I'm just happy that you're here. This show would not be possible without you all. And so thank you so much, as always, for being here. I'm looking forward to diving deep in this Sagittarius new moon with you. So at this time, let's go ahead and transition into this podcast episode. I trust, I expand, I inspire. Each time that we gather for a new or full moon, I will offer you 3 phrases that I am feeling and sensing into with the energy of either the new or the full moon. And so for this Sagittarius new moon total solar eclipse, I trust, I expand, I inspire. You can pull a tarot card for each of these phrases. You can journal about them, fill in the blank. And so I'll do that with you now. For me right now, I trust in my higher vision. I trust in my guides. I trust in God. This is what I'm feeling into here on this Sagittarius new moon. A lot of surrender and trust here. I expand my mind. I expand my auric field. These are things that we can drop into and tune into. I inspire myself through gratitude. I inspire myself with hope for the future. I trust, I expand, I inspire. So again, the cards that we can have out on our altar: the Queen of Wands, Temperance, and the Wheel of Fortune. These cards, by putting them out, they will help to awaken your intuition, unlock your intuition while I'm talking to you about the energy that we're moving through. So I encourage you to set those out. So this is the final new moon of 2020. It has been quite a year indeed. And so new moons are the dark night. It's a time to go within, to release, particularly when it's an eclipse. New moon is often a time that we plant seeds of new intention as well. But when it's the eclipse, this is not necessarily the invitation, is more about release. And so what are you releasing in 2020? The final new moon of 2020, it brings major realignments for us, sacred closeouts. It's a time for deep release, right? So the invitation of the solar eclipse is to go fully within. And so you can start doing that now if it feels okay for you. You can close the eyes and you can begin to take deep breaths into the body. Sagittarius rules over the thighs, the hips. So you can place your hands on this part of the body, honor this sacred part of the body. Sudden new insights are available to us, particularly with Sagittarius and also during eclipse portals. Sudden new insights and downloads are available at this time. So this is also why it's important to kind of slow down, go within. Major upgrades are available to us at this time. So this can make us feel scattered. Sagittarian energy can be quite restless. Since we're working with the moon and eclipses, this is a very sensitive time. We might feel exposed, overly emotional, heightened, intense. So be aware of these tendencies within yourself, but also in the world around you, people, relationships, when you're out walking in the street, just be aware that this is a heightened time. So not to overwhelm your system, remember that the eclipse portal is not necessarily the time to set intentions, but rather it is a window of opportunity to simply be with and listen to whatever wants to transpire for you at this time. Sagittarius is a great sign of aspiration, of optimism. Sagittarius is the fiery archer, right? That's aiming its arrow toward the cosmos, towards an ever uplifting goal of interconnectedness. So we're calling to mind the centaur, half human, half horse, with the bow and arrow, but remembering that this is the eclipse portal, and we have the south node in Sagittarius and the north node in Gemini. So the south node is about release. The south node is outdated karma. South node feels like, to me, like when you take your plate of food that you're not going to eat and you scrape it off into the compost. This feels like the south node to me. It is said to be the tail of the dragon, the south node, whereas the north node is the head of the dragon, where we're heading. So having, this south node in Sagittarius, the invitation centers more around release and realignment at this time, particularly as it relates to the Sagittarius archetype. And so if we're thinking of the archer, what we can do is imagine the archer within is not out shooting its arrows, but instead is in deep rest and recovery. Letting go of broken arrows that no longer support you. And when you let go of the old arrows, this allows you to refuel with new ones. And so when I think of Sagittarius, I think of world travel. I think of higher education. So I'm on this new moon reflecting on all of the places that I've traveled in the world. And maybe you can do that now. You can call to mind somewhere that you've traveled somewhere else in the world. And if you haven't been gifted the opportunity to travel somewhere else in the world, what is the farthest place that you've ever traveled to? And what did that represent and symbolize to you? For me, the first time that I left the United States, where I was born, was when I studied abroad. And again, Sagittarius is connected to universities, higher education. Studying abroad is a Sagittarian theme. And I studied abroad in Wales in the United Kingdom. And so I'm reflecting on my relationship to that place and time and what I have learned and cultivated since that time period. When the North Node was in Sagittarius in 2011, I got my yoga teacher certification. I was learning about a spiritual practice that was from somewhere else in the world, from India. This is all Sagittarian. It is the spiritual practices. It is the philosophical practices from other parts of the world, particularly fiery ones like yoga that bring you into your body. Sagittarius is a mutable fire. It's about moving the fire through the body. So you can think back to 2011. What was going on at that time? That is when the North Node was in Sagittarius. We were being inspired toward Sagittarius at that time. And now we are coming back to releasing and reflecting and opening ourselves up to new insight around these areas of our life. And so at this time, I am reigniting the internal flame with my yoga practice. It's been 9 years. The nodes of fate take 18 years. And so in another 9 years, the North Node will be back in Sagittarius again. But for now, South Node in Sagittarius. So I'm calling to mind the United Kingdom right now. I'm calling to mind India. But since this is the South Node, what are we releasing here? In what ways might I have contributed to some sort of cultural appropriation by learning yoga and teaching yoga? this is just something for me to reflect on, and for all of us, is to reflect on what outdated modes do you have in regards to your relationship to the world at large. The South Node can bring up the shadow expression of a sign. So the shadow of Sagittarius would be someone that has a closed worldview and is very fiery and fiery ignorance towards the world. So this is like someone who has one path, and they believe that path to be their only way, the only way that the world works. And so that might be exasperated in other people at this time, and those are parts of yourself that you are learning to let go of. So yes, again, Sagittarius, a great sign of optimism, and we do have this opportunity here to imagine that the archer here within is in deep rest and recovery, letting go of the broken arrows that no longer serve us, and opening ourselves up to refueling and receiving new ones. And so again, now is a time to upgrade and reassess. So what parts of you might feel burned out? What parts of you might feel hopeless? What outdated beliefs no longer serve you? What practices and philosophies do you have in your life that fill you up with a new sense of hope and gratitude? Do you have these practices in your life? When I think of these practices, it's like a chanting practice, which we'll talk about in a moment with our queen of Sagittarius, Tina Turner, has a chanting practice, but it is these fiery practices that uplift and inspire us. And so ask for gentle guidance at this time on ways to be more in alignment with a higher guiding truth. Seek out the support and the guidance from a teacher, a philosophy, or a mentor. If you don't have one in your life and you desire that support, this eclipse encourages us to make space in our life for something new to emerge. So yes, on my Sagittarius altar, this is what I have. So each new and full moon, I build an altar, and I talk about it, in depth here on the podcast episode, but I also release a photo of it in the newsletter, and usually on the Instagram too. I'll put a picture of my altar too. So if you are interested, if you're a visual learner, you can look along with these podcast episodes by signing up for a newsletter. And in that, I have pretty much everything that I'm talking about right now. I have typed out and written for you so you can see it nice and clearly. But you'll see a photo of my Sagittarius altar. And if you're not signed up for the newsletter, again, you can go to the Instagram, which is cosmic.cousins. And so altar building helps me to ground my astrology practice and to cultivate a moment of intention and reflection. And so on my Sagittarius altar, I have the tarot cards, right? So I also placed a braid. So on the Gemini full moon 2 weeks ago, I actually got eclipsed. So I had long hair down to my shoulders, and my sister-in-law, who is a Gemini moon, my nephew and niece and my brother all cut my hair. So they braided my hair into 2 sections, and when they cut them off, my nephew said that they were umbilical cords and that I just had twins, which I thought was really interesting, since Gemini is the twins and he knows nothing about astrology, but the lighthearted profundity of his words is not lost on me. So I place my braids on this Sagittarius new moon altar to honor all that's being released during this eclipse portal. I now have a shaved head, a bald head, and I also placed these 2 blissed out bald faces. They're these sculptures of bald faces. I found these 2 sculptures on a walk in my neighborhood, and they are quite reminiscent of Gemini and their duality, but they are reminding me of that evolution towards Gemini North Node at this time. But their baldness and their humor speaks to me of the monk-like jovial spiritual nature and devotion of Sagittarius. And so as I have short hair now, I'm also reflecting back on my meditation practices and reigniting my relationship to both meditation and yoga at this time. I also have on this altar a dark moon potion from Modern Women to aid in deep release. It has smoky quartz in there, black tourmaline ghost pipe, and black birch dark moon kelp. And so, having things around us, medicine that helps aid us in release, is great. I also have an eye pillow on this altar that is dark indigo, which is the color of the third eye. There's major need for rest at this time in a physical sense, but also for the third eye. And so this eye pillow is reminding me to rest, and it's reminding all of us too, with the Aquarian energies coming through next week, and the sun currently conjunct the Galactic Center. Be sure to carve out extra space to unplug and quiet the mind. I also have a chistolite stone. I usually will always put a stone on my altar. Sagittarius connects us to world religions, and this stone is really great. It helps aid me to dispel ignorance and create clear boundaries with oppressive and dogmatic worldviews, which again is a shadow expression of Sagittarius. And so I come from a really strong Christian upbringing, and I always carry this chistolite stone with me when I'm with my family or I'm in my hometown. It helps me to create clear boundaries. And so it's usually always on my Sagittarius altar. I have Saturn and Sag, which I had mentioned earlier. And I usually place this stone on my Hierophant altar too, which 2021 is a Hierophant year. So I will have more thoughts on that to come in the new year. As far as the tarot cards, I think it's nice for us to just touch base with them. Sagittarius's soul growth card is Temperance, which, shows an angel on Earth that is a symbol for the recirculation of life after death. So Sagittarius, right, comes after Scorpio. And so this represents a Sagittarian ability to transmute hardship into new life with faith and hope, and also calling upon a higher power to help aid in that process. The Wheel of Fortune is Jupiter, which is often depicted as a vision in the sky with symbols and archetypes. And so it offers us a clue into what it is that we seek as humans here on this earth, which is a deeper understanding of truth. And so the Wheel of Fortune teaches us that, the more lovingly present we can be with this cosmic intelligence of cycles, which is life, when we are in line with this and have quieted to feel the presence of cycles within and without, then this is when we prosper. And so, yes, the Wheel of Fortune you can even think of as like your birth chart in the sky. And, the Wheel of Fortune is very much a symbol for us for study, which Sagittarius also does. We have the Queen of Wands here as the embodiment of Sagittarius, mutable fire, and this takes it a bit further. The Queen of Wands goes deep within to reconnect with her desires and her creative impulses, and it's through this connection with the internal world that the Queen of Wands inspires us to realign with our deeper knowings, which we're doing at this time. And so I see her sitting down, and it's like she's in the seat of her own intuition. She acts from a place of intuition and confidence. It's a fiery fearlessness that the Queen of Wands inspires in us to help us expand the horizons of our world. So this is the beautiful altar we have for the Sagittarius new moon. And let's continue to explore the invitation here. So Sagittarius is an interesting sign because, this Sagittarius new moon will bring hopefully gentle. We ask for gentle realignment. Sometimes it can be, the eclipse energy can have a bit more of an intense energy, but we're asking for gentle realignments at this time with our guiding inner truth. But Sagittarius is what I like to call the collective fire sign. And so it's not just about our own personal experience at this time. It is also about the world at large, which we know Sagittarius is connected to travel and to other cultures, other religions of the world. And so as an astrologer, it is my job to look at the world around us, particularly whenever we're moving through a Sagittarian transit, especially during eclipse portals, and we're looking to the world around us for clues and insights into the ways that the Sagittarius energy is being expressed. And this way, when we look at the world at large, When I'm working with individual clients or when I'm sharing information in my newsletter and on my podcast, I'm able to offer reliable and practical insights for you to make informed and aligned decisions in your own life. So Sagittarius, again, it's connected to world travel, cultural understanding, and the world at large. So with a solar eclipse in Sagittarius, this brings to the forefront major shifts and realignments on the world stage. So this past week, the United Kingdom jumped ahead in the global race to begin mass inoculation against COVID-19 when it gave emergency use approval for the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. So this was a sudden change. It's happening during the eclipse portal, which is from the Gemini full moon to the Sagittarius new moon. So sudden changes. And then the first doses of the vaccine in the United States is actually scheduled for the day of the solar eclipse. The distribution is scheduled for December 14th, 2020, which is the Sagittarius solar eclipse. So that's the first thing we observe just going on in the world around us, and it is the world at large. I had mentioned studying abroad in the United Kingdom, and here I am bringing the United Kingdom up again, which is interesting. Another major world event happening on the same day as the Sagittarius solar eclipse is the Electoral College gathers in their states and cast votes confirming the nomination for president and vice president of the United States. That's also really interesting to note that it is also the same exact day as this eclipse. And so with the solar eclipse conjunct Donald Trump's natal Sagittarius moon, this indicates a deep release around home and family for the 45th president of the United States. And so there are major changes on the world stage happening right now. In addition, another world event that's garnering fiery momentum is one of the largest protests in human history is going on right now in India with farmers and supporters taking to the streets. According to CNN, the farmers there have reached a stalemate with the government over its proposed amendments to the laws the farmers feel will ravage their livelihoods and create an opportunity for large private companies to enter and exploit the entire agriculture sector. India is a major provider for consumers globally. And so that is also an event that's taking place right now that is worth considering in light of Sagittarius, which is also interesting because I mentioned India as well because of my yoga practice. So both the United Kingdom and India have popped up twice now. So yes, the world at large comes into this eclipse portal. And it's important for us to remember that we have the North Node in Gemini. And so in our own personal lives, we are being invited to build bridges between duality and our immediate surroundings, which is Gemini. If you do find yourself drawn towards the Sagittarian themes, particularly of world travel at this time, remember that the South Node is in Sagittarius until the end of January of 2022. So the South Node encourages us to release outdated worldviews during this transit. It does not feel necessarily in alignment with traveling the world over this next year. So yes, Sagittarius. We can look to Sagittarius and an embodiment by looking to our Queen of Sagittarius. So if you are new to the show, in 2018 and 2019, we worked on a project called the Zodiac Queens, in which the Cosmic Cousins listeners and followers on the Instagram voted and decided who out of all of the Sagittarian iconic figures was the most Sagittarian. And so we chose Tina Turner as Queen of Sagittarius. You can see an image of her as the angel on the Temperance card in the newsletter and also on the Instagram for the show. And yes, Tina Turner is known for her fiery performances. She does embody this mutable fire quality. She has an uplifting generosity about her performances and just the way that she exudes herself. Tina Turner had and has continued to have a very expansive life. She is the one zodiac queen in the wheel that has lived abroad, including Queen of Pisces, Nina Simone. These two are connecting us to world travel. And yes, her expansive life connects us to the essence and the exuberance of the Sagittarian spirit. But we also said Sagittarius builds bridges that unite religions and philosophies of the world, and Tina Turner has also done this in her life and work. She was raised Baptist, and she's always had prayer in her life, but it wasn't until she was in a really dark moment that she was introduced to Buddhism, and that's when her life really began to change. And so she credits the spiritual chant Nam Yo Renge Kyo for helping endure difficult times in her life. So she's now been a practicing Buddhist for almost 50 years and refers to herself as a Buddhist Baptist, building bridges between religions. And with her love of religion and culture, she's released multiple spiritual albums, which include 12 prayers and mantras from the religions Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, and Sikhism. And so at this time, we have Sun and Tina Turner. And new moon total solar eclipse in Tina Turner.
Ni say sun ju sun mai an jo ni king go jo jo bu ji e jen jen mer yo go ji e ma nang e nan yo he sai show ma nya ji bu yo ti jo we sha ga bu zo jin yo na san ma na mo jo jo but din yo jo bu mo yo do ho jim yo jo jen yo jo bu man jo jo jen then mi zo wo ho so ki jo so the we jo nang ge jo as go jo there I ju
It's always so inspiring to reconnect with Tina Turner's spiritual life, and what better time to do that than here on this Sagittarius new moon. And so it's my hopes that the life and the work of Tina Turner, our Queen of Sagittarius, can help guide and inspire us all here on the Sagittarius eclipse. And so as we move through this portal of deep release and realignment, we also have a big week coming up, and it's the moment that we've all been waiting for, at least in the astrology world here in 2020, which is the Great Conjunction. In Aquarius, Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius, both planets enter this cosmic air sign, collective air sign this coming week. I'll give you the dates now. These are important dates. December 17th, okay? Saturn enters Aquarius. So this is on Thursday, December 17th, Saturn enters Aquarius. And then on the 19th, Jupiter enters Aquarius. This is Saturday, December 19th, 2020. And then on Monday, December 21st, on the winter solstice on the northern hemisphere, Jupiter and Saturn align in the sky at the 0 degrees of Aquarius. So, yes, this occurs only once every 20 years. That Saturn and Jupiter align in the sky. So it's a big deal. The Great Conjunction, it signifies the moment in time when Jupiter and Saturn align in the sky. And so they are the two outermost visible planets. So when we're talking about traditional astrology, these were the farthest out planets that we worked with. And their conjunction has been tracked and observed for thousands of years and has been indicated of major generational shifts and alignments for humanity when they align in the sky. And so what makes this great conjunction even more unique is that the two planets are joining at the 0 degree of Aquarius. So last time this happened was in the year 2000, and here we are, 2020. And so, yes, it is unique because we're shifting from Saturn and Jupiter aligning Earth sign to air signs now, and that's why we're here at the 0 degree of Aquarius. So we're heralding in roughly a new 200-year time period of the air element. So go ahead and just take a deep breath into that and honor the element of air. So when we're following this Jupiter and Saturn conjunction, again, every 20 years, it begins to form a shape of a triangle. A triangle pattern emerges in which the planets join in each of the three signs of the same element. So for the last 200 years, Jupiter and Saturn have aligned in the Earth signs Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. And so this past 200 years, it's indicated a time period of focus on the element of Earth. This is on finance, productivity, values, businesses, commerce, wealth, stability, and the material world. So right now we are crossing this threshold from earth to air, and what an honor it is to be alive at this time. And the fact that you're listening to this podcast right now is an indicator of that shift. We're moving into air, which 200 years ago, at the beginning of this earth conjunction, great conjunctions, someone wouldn't have been listening to someone talk about astrology. So we've already likely been feeling these shifts, and it feels more like a spectrum, but the collective's values are shifting away from the earth, shifting away from the material, and more towards the air, or more towards the ethereal. So communication, intellect, and social awareness begin to rise in new ways. There is a greater emphasis for us on equality, freedom, and connection. Major social and technological advancements are indicated by this shift. A wide array of consciousness-raising practices disperse across the globe and into outer space, creating a gridlock of new thought with the potential for interconnectedness. So this upcoming week, it is huge, and I highly encourage you to partake in some sort of ritual to usher in this Aquarian energy air portal. One thing you could do is just simply open your windows, particularly on December 21st when Jupiter and Saturn are conjunct, to invite the air element into your life. Open your windows, take a moment to pause and reconsider the magnificent splendor of you. Take deep breaths, connect to the air element, check in with your future self for guidance on present day possibility. This is Aquarian. Again, check in with your future self for guidance on present day possibility. Write down your hopes and visions for the future of humanity. And you can think to 200 years from now. So 2222 is what I'm writing down my hopes and visions for that year for humanity. You can place your star card out on your altar, which is a soul growth for Aquarius. And this is a time for us to bask in the starlight of our willingness to evolve here as humans. So reach out to others who are sparkly and who inspire you to expand your mind. Celebrate the air element through light and ethereal movement and dance. And take a moment to just really bow to the cosmic vastness of our universe, to bow to your continual tenacity to show up to this human experience. It is important to note that this time, this next week, particularly, we could be feeling really scattered. Aquarius rules over the nervous system. This could feel intense and aggravating to the nervous system because we are all going to be adjusting to these shock waves of upgrades that are taking place in our energy body. Aquarius is all about energy. If you look at the glyph for Aquarius, it's 2 energy lines. So for those of you who are more sensitive, are more Aquarian, which we all are in many ways here in this age of Aquarius. But if you do resonate more with Aquarian energy, you may feel extra energized by these transits. You might also feel extra exhausted by these transits, and you might move through these 2 extremes. That is to be expected. So remember, there's no need to make erratic decisions at this time. We do have the next year or so with major Aquarian energies that is available to us. And of course, the next 200 years, we will be working with and honoring the air element. So again, take your time, remember to ground down, take deep breaths, be gentle on the nervous system. I mean, some of this might sound like a broken record because I'm always reminding you of this. I'm always telling you to take sweet care and remember to take deep breaths. But that is because this is something that I'm reminding myself always. And I'm here just to remind you, and I'm, hopefully here helping usher in this time period for you so that you can be in alignment with your truth. There will be a lot more information on Aquarius from me in the new year, but for now, I will leave you with this. Aquarian energy can have losing ourselves to the group. So, as much as Aquarius inspires us to reach out and engage with community and the collective, Aquarius is also about cultivating sacred space away from the group. And you can look at the star card and the tarot to really inspire that. But being in your own vibrational field is important in order for you to make the shifts needed in your life to cultivate and gather with others who share in the collective vision that you hold for the future. Collective intention, the power of collective intention is so important. So sound healing, self-Reiki and energy healing, chakra and ambient healing music, stargazing, unplugging from the internet and electricity. These are all really great. Crystal grids, crystal baths are all ways to work with Aquarian energy in a helpful and healing way. I do recommend that you go to your most sacred sunset spot on the winter solstice, December 21st, 2020, and look towards the western horizon. And just behind the setting sun, just after the setting sun, you will see Jupiter and Saturn join together as what will seem to appear as being one giant planet or one giant star. And this is the great conjunction at the 0 degrees of Aquarius. So, if you aren't able to make it to the sunset on the actual solstice, or if you live somewhere like I do in Portland that is always cloudy here this time of year, you may not be able to see it. But do know that if you can't make it on the actual solstice all this week and throughout the next few weeks, you will be able to see Jupiter and Saturn toward the western horizon at sunset. And they may be joined together in the sky, or maybe they'll be just like a fingernail lengths apart from each other. This is really important for us to just make contact with these planets during this transit, particularly at the beginning. This helps us to move outside of our intellectual understanding of astrology and to observe it in nature. And as you gaze at these planets, this is a time for you to really open yourself up to receiving cosmic downloads, particularly into your purpose here on this earth at this time. And it is a powerful portal vortex. I'm honored to be here with you and to communicate about these topics with you as we move into this air element 200-year time period. And so having the Sagittarius new moon solar eclipse just a few days before this great conjunction is no surprise. It's clearing us out. Sagittarius and Aquarius are both these expansive signs. They are sextile with each other. And so, who knows what the future holds, but we do know some radical shifts and realignments are on the horizon for us all. And so take deep breaths into your nervous system, ground down, bring your hands to your thighs, and in the meantime, be well, and I'll see you on the other side. And so at this time, we're going to transition into a special interview conversation with Sagittarius Sun, Sagittarius Moon, Lars Mellis. Here with us on the show today, I'm really excited to introduce you to Live Your Truth Lars, our Lars Mellis, who is a professional astrologer based in West Hollywood, California. In addition to meeting with clients, he hosts an astrology-themed YouTube channel that contains series including Take the Scare Out of Square and monthly astro weather reports. Lars is also currently on the board of the NCGRLA as the Outreach Director. Thanks for being on the show with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a long time coming. I mean, we've been astro friends for probably about 3 years now. When I was in LA, we got to hang out in person some, back when people were hanging out in person.
Yeah, we've been through several eclipses together, for sure.
That's right.
It's been a long time coming. I'm happy that it worked out on an eclipse, since there's definitely, I feel like there's been more than one eclipse season in which we've just done a dinner or a picnic or something.
Totally. Yeah, and this eclipse is huge for you, and that's part of why I asked you to be on the show today, because we are celebrating the Sagittarius new moon solar eclipse. And it's big for Sagittarius. across the board. I would say it's big for all of us. And I'm really feeling this as the last eclipse right before the great conjunction too. Feels particularly like a deep release for me in my own life. How has this Sagittarius energy been for you as a Sag?
Yeah, totally. So I think, you bring this up because not only am I a Sag sun, but I'm a Sag moon, Sag midheaven, Sag Mercury, Sag Mars.
Right.
So needless to say, that stellium is thick and juicy in
Mhm.
Sagittarius, just like Sag rules the thighs and the glutes.
That's right.
Very much. Not only is it hitting my moon, but it's hitting midpoints. So many of my midpoints are at like in the 20s, if you will, where this eclipse is happening. So definitely profound for me. And I think, I'm thankful it doesn't feel like an earthquake, because eclipses are known for being this wily, uncontrollable energy, typically associated with severing. For me, the primary point in my chart and where it hits is my moon midheaven midpoint. And if you think about the moon relating to emotional security, and then the midheaven being the zenith of the chart and really related to kind of legacy and what you're remembered for, I think for me, for several years, I've been afraid to feel secure in pursuing sort of what my ultimate goals are and like what I think that my midheaven really represents. And this being a new moon eclipse, I think, is kind of severing the doubt from me. I like to view it. I'm sure that I'm sure there's multiple things that eclipses take a while to really unfold. But what I'm initially inferring from it, especially with it being co-present with the South Node so closely, is sort of a shedding of what no longer needs to be for me to, reach that midheaven kind of zenith point.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you have a Sagittarius moon. What for you is the difference between your Sagittarius sun and moon?
That's such a unique question. I think the sun and the moon are so different, right? Whereas like the sun is very much about vitality, how we seek to shine. It's very, in my view, forward looking, where the moon is very much like looking back, because the moon is all about that emotional security and how we seek nurturance. And I think the biggest difference is truly in regards to like how mutable fire functions. Because when it comes to my Sag moon, there's a level of a need for hope and a need for optimism and a need to look to the horizon in order to feel emotionally secure. And then with my Sag sun, it more so correlates to spontaneity in
Right.
my mind. And like, I cannot be in anything mundane.
Mhm.
I have a very unique day job. And then as an astrologer, I definitely don't necessarily have a super big framework I work with. I really make it an individualized session per client I work with based on their needs and really getting to know them.
Yeah. So I'm feeling some shape shifting energy coming through. You have all this mutable energy, double Sag, Pisces rising. And, we had a lot of questions come in from followers on Instagram, which I will always put that out to the listeners of the show. And sometimes I'll get a few questions, but there was something about posting you, and maybe it was because of like, what did you call it? The Kardashian photo?
Yeah, I did a Kim K paper magazine photo, which is definitely showing off Sag's best asset, if you will. And I did just mention what Sag rules. And I hear that it did attract a few people to ask a question.
Yes. So, and this is the first question that I thought we'd start with. And this is from Emma Bronwyn on Instagram, writes in, what does living your truth mean to you? How do you feel your work helps you and others do that? So your Live Your Truth Lars is your Instagram handle. And so you can follow Lars there, or you also have an astrology handle too that you just started, which we'll talk about in a moment. But Live Your Truth is like this mantra that you put out in the world. So I'm gonna ask you again, what does living your truth mean to you? And how do you feel your work helps you and others do that?
Great question, Emma. Wow. I feel, very on the spot in a way. But if you think about it, like, what is in Astrology 101 when we're all baby students and still learning, like, one of the first keywords associated with Sagittarius, and that's truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the reason why Linda Goodman, the first thing she talked about in her book Sun Signs was that Sag is going to be at the party putting its foot in its mouth. It's just because we're just speaking the truth, right? We can't help it. We're just speaking the truth. That's what it is. And like, I think for me, living your truth truly means living authentically with yourself. Living in LA and just in other sort of periods of my life, I have felt the need to try to be something that I'm not, or try to like prove my worth, or like prove that I'm welcome. And like, living your truth means you're welcome just as you are, to yourself, not to anyone else. There could be people who are giving you messaging otherwise, but as long as you feel like you're welcome just as you are, that's what living your truth means. And that's what I'm trying to put out into the world.
And, having the Sagittarius midheaven, this is the part of your chart that is going to show us what you're putting out in the world too. And I was curious about the actual degree of your midheaven. I'm seeing is 27 degrees of Sagittarius. And this is right around the Galactic Center. Do you work with the Galactic Center?
I don't, but like any mutable person, like super open to working with it. If you want to give me the rundown.
Yeah, so the Galactic Center, essentially, it's the center of the galaxy. So as we have the sun as the center of our solar system, the Galactic Center is around 26, 27 degrees of Sagittarius in one's chart. And this is a portal, a cosmic portal. And so seeing that as your midheaven, it does feel super expansive. And knowing that you are an astrologer feels really aligned with that. And this reminds me of a question that Fire and the 12th on Instagram writes in. How do you feel Sagittarius relates to the unconscious mind?
I love this. Since I just spoke about this, I do moon circles with my Reiki master, Sarah Taylor, every lunation essentially. And we just, for the last eclipse, which was, of course, a Gemini moon, Sag sun eclipse, just talked about this particular concept. Because if you think about it, Mercury is technically in its detriment in Sagittarius. And I used air quotes there, which you can't see while listening to a podcast. But with me, like, it's not that I disagree with dignity by any means. I think it's important to discuss dignity and where it fits into things, but it's not on the binary of good, bad, like nothing is on a binary. And so for me, Mercury in Sagittarius is technically in its detriment because of the fact that Sagittarius really relates to higher consciousness. And what I mean by that is that if you think about Mercury is all about analysis. It's really about thinking and what you're going to communicate. And with Sag, it's an element of removing the analysis from it and very much getting in touch with just the true authenticity of how you feel and speaking that. And then in addition to that, sort of where it stems in the journey of the zodiac, you have it right after Scorpio, which I believe is very much about death, rebirth, and transformation is how I would describe the real archetype of Scorpio. And to me, Sag is like very much the death of the death of death in a way. And like just by getting so esoteric in that sort of framing of it, to me speaks to why it relates to the unconscious mind. Like what happens, like what does it mean to you? Like what does the death of death mean to you? And I feel like Sag really being a mutable sign brings us from the fixed energy into that and then goes into the collective of Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. So that's sort of what I see from it.
Yeah, it initiates this, what I like to think of as the third tier of the astrological journey, which takes us into the collective signs. So I think of Sagittarius as super conscious is what I call it, or transpersonal fire, super conscious fire, and the final four signs I would connect there. So I thought the question was really, really cool. And the unconscious part of it did speak to me of the Galactic Center in many ways, because it is this, which also feels super conscious to me. It's access to higher mind. Mm-hmm. And this is one of Sagittarius's themes. And I like that you're bringing in detriment and you're using air quotes to talk about detriment. I think I have my Mercury in detriment too, which is Mercury in Pisces.
Yeah, because that would be opposite Virgo.
Yeah. So when doing, because I actually don't have like a traditional training in astrology, and I'm familiar with the terms detriment. Is it true that detriment will always be the sign opposite of what that planet is at home in. So since Mercury rules over Virgo and Gemini, the signs opposite of Virgo and Gemini are Pisces and Sag, and therefore Mercury's detriment in those placements.
Yeah, so if you think about it, like the sun is technically in detriment in Aquarius because it's in domicile in Leo. But like, I think what's so important to note, as someone who has several things in detriment as well, is like, I don't like the fear mongering that I think unfortunately has sort of come about from old school writing. And it's important to remember, like way back when, you know, these terms were really talked about, like the life expectancy was like 16 and people were like literally in armies and there were like barbarians and stuff or like whatever. I'm not like, you know, not being totally historically accurate, but I'm just trying to say that the circumstances were so different. So the language and almost like the alarm around it was for that time. And just like with anything, you know, it's important to have a modern, like for it to be living and breathing and to take a modern lens to it too.
Right. And I think that's a good example when you're saying I'm not being totally historically accurate. That could be an example of Mercury and Sagittarius too.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. And so in some ways we could say that detriment is also a placement in which we're fully evolving through the polar sign. And, you know, to think of like the sun in detriment in Aquarius, well, if you can have the sun expressed in this very humanitarian sign, then it has an opportunity to really evolve the attributes of the sun. And same with Mercury. For Mercury to go all the way out to the far reaches of the cosmos with Sagittarius, it allows Mercury to be expressed in a whole new expansive way.
Totally. I mean, I think about, I was just talking to one of my best friends yesterday who says that she, whenever she gets on the phone with me, she has her thesaurus app ready. And I don't mean to like speak in GRE by any means, but it's very much my Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, which like I'm trying to get a point across, but I'm using just unnecessarily large words, which come so naturally to me. But to so many other people, it's just like, can you just use like a 3 to 5 letter word? You don't need to, you know, use a 12-letter word.
I love it. And I love this, that we both have Mercury in detriment. And here we are.
Here we are on a podcast.
Yes. So the Olivia Hope on Instagram writes in, what transit in memory meant the most to you? What happened in your life then?
Wow. Yeah. I know Olivia, shout out to her. She is also a wonderful astrologer. And yeah, Sag, when Saturn was in Sagittarius, it really felt like my Saturn return. It truly, like, I'm going through my Saturn return right now. It's the official date is January 14th, 2021.
Okay. But and you have Saturn in Aquarius.
And I do. Yeah. 3 degrees Aquarius. And I do, I feel like I already went through my return kind of because of the fact that I have this massive stellium at the top of my chart. My angles are also mutable. So as you know, Big Daddy Saturn was all up on my stellium, he was squaring my ascendant descendant axis. Truly, every part of my life felt like it was falling apart and needed to be built back up. And if you think about what the Saturn return kind of represents in a way, is not only confronting us with our perceived limitations, which definitely it was a similar thing that happened considering Saturn was conjunct my sun, my moon, my Mercury, my Mars, and my midheaven. But it also is about kind of like what structures in place are formidable and solid and what structures in place need to be dismantled in order for you to erect a sturdy foundation. That's how I view Saturn conjunctions and the Saturn return, depending upon where in the chart it falls and what aspects it makes. And for me, literally, I changed careers. I got my heart broken for the first time. I got pretty injured as well, and I needed to grapple like with my physical vitality as well. The sun is the ruler of my 6th using quadrant house systems. And I had to, I had my first friend breakup, which I am like the most genial. I've never had a friend breakup before. And it was like, I was processing with people that I shouldn't have trusted. I was like doing all of the wrong things. And Saturn just put like this huge magnifying glass to every aspect of my life. I will say through it and through picking up the pieces, I really leaned into astrology a lot more. I was just very colloquial with it, and I took, I definitely like leaned in and realized its value and its purpose in helping me live my best life. I switched day jobs and I switched career passions, and I really leveled up in the ninth house stuff, because it was in the ninth house for the most part, in regards to really educating myself from a higher education lens of doing serious Brene Brown work, if you will.
Mm. I'm also hearing, even though it was Saturn and Sagittarius, it feels like you were getting to know your own natal Saturn and Aquarius as well. When I hear you getting more serious about astrology, I think of Aquarian energy really being connected to astrology, and also the friend breakup, Aquarius and friendship. So it's interesting to think how when you go through a transit, it also can awaken different parts in your chart. And so it'll be cool for us to check back in on the other side of your Saturn return to see how it might have felt different for you from having Saturn hanging out with your sun versus having your Saturn return.
Definitely.
But it does sound like maybe you're a little bit more prepared than others who have Saturn in Aquarius, since you have already experienced it so intimately.
Yeah, it definitely felt like Rocky 1 when Saturn was in Sag over everything. And I feel like I already had a fight and I'm going into the second round of a boxing match. Whereas for a lot of people, the Saturn return is very much like that first Rocky, if you will. And I almost question, because my Saturn return is so quick. And a lot of my clients get 3 waves of it, of course, as it's going to retrograde and it's going to come back, whatever. It's going to, make 3 conjunctions. For me, I just get 1 real quick. My technical window is a month of the Saturn return. Of course, you feel it a lot more than that. But I almost wonder whether my soul picked this chart because of the fact that I had this really long Saturn conjunction over my stellium that was squaring my angles, my ascendant descendant axis, and then it's that was where most of the Saturn work happened, and this is almost like a pop quiz, if you will, or like a TBT, like a throwback, kind of thing quickly.
Well, you have Saturn and Aquarius at the 3rd degree, so I would imagine you likely felt some of that back in end of March and April when Saturn first entered Aquarius. And there's something unique about Saturn and Aquarius in that whenever anything's in Aquarius, it's about the group and humanity. And it really feels like we're all moving through a Saturn return collectively at this time, since it is Saturn in Aquarius. Yeah. So Ray Wolf on Instagram writes in, and I think this is going to get us back to your mutable energy. Saturn's so serious and structured, but you do have a lot of mutable energy, especially you have Jupiter, your ruling planet, in the sign of Virgo, which is mutable earth. We said double Sag, Pisces rising. Ray Wolf writes in, as someone with mostly fixed and cardinal energy, I feel like I would love to hear about someone else's personal relationship to being so influenced by mutable signs.
Love that. And, I will definitely answer this question, but just to throw it back to you, you have, of your big 3, 2 fixed, 1 mutable. So I feel like you're a good kind of, arbiter or, medium between me and Ray, it sounds like. Yeah. But I will speak to the fact that one thing I love about modality is that no modality is good or bad. Just like in astrology, nothing is good or bad. There's pros and cons to each. I do believe that with all of this heavily mutable energy that I have, there is kind of a dust yourself off. I associate it with resiliency, and maybe there's other parts of my chart that speak to that as well. It could be the Venus square Saturn, now that it's, now that by progression, it's definitely progressed out of the square and I'm really unlocking that strength. But I would definitely say that, one second, sorry, my printer started. Can you ask the question again?
I thought it was like a cat or something.
No, it's my printer.
Well, I think this is just it. This feels very mutable to me.
This is very mutable as well, sort of going with the flow. Of course, my mom is printing right now.
Thanks, Mom.
With other people, I'm used to living alone, so give it a second.
So your mom has a Virgo moon.
So yeah, she's Sag Virgo. So she's a Sag Virgo. Sag. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
And here she is printing. Virgo, working, giving us the messages.
Always working. Cool. So.
And you're living at home right now, which I find interesting because the North Node's in Gemini, kind of pointing right down at your IC, because we said you have that Sag midheaven. So this whole year, you've actually been back at home, right? Or half the year anyway.
Yeah, since June, actually, when it was at 20, like it was at like 29 in June or something. I want to
So
say.
the eclipse season.
Yeah, exactly. And so very much, yeah, the first eclipse season brought me home. And I feel like this eclipse season, I'm really started making plans about when I'm going back to LA. So it's kind of a good bookmarking. But the printer is off. I apologize. So I can answer it again if you want.
It's all good. I think maybe we can try your mutable energy live in action. So here on Cosmic Cousins, we do a thing called Cosmic Slip and Slide.
I love that.
Where I ask you as many questions as you can in 60 seconds, and then we'll talk about it. So it's, there's no right or wrong answer. Yes. And I know that you're friends with Colin Bedell.
Yeah.
Who was on the show
It's great
2 weeks ago for the Gemini full moon lunar eclipse.
Makes sense.
And Colin currently is the running champion with answering the most questions in 60 seconds.
Oh God.
So we'll see. No pressure. But I know Sagittarius can be a little competitive with that fire. But
I'm competitive, but I also have that Mercury retrograde in Sag. So we'll see how much I can get out of the mouth.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and put 60 seconds on the clock.
Let's do it.
I just organized my phone by app color. So if you see here, I can't find my stopwatch. I don't know. I also have the Archer here.
I'm obsessed with that background.
Yes. So I change it for each astrological sign.
It looks like it's in the top left.
Thank you. Okay. I'm just kind of like getting used to my new system here. Okay. So 60 seconds is on the clock, and we'll start now. What is the first word that comes to mind when you think of Sagittarius?
Truth.
Name an iconic Sagittarius tennis player.
Good question. It would be Chris Evert.
What far-off place in the world most connects you to Sag?
Bali.
And if Sagittarius were a PhD program, what would Sagittarius be?
Higher education management.
Which Sagittarius comedian do you most admire?
Margaret Cho.
If Sagittarius were a cocktail?
Mai Tai.
What Sagittarius musician do you most love?
Amy Lee.
What Pokemon do you most connect to Sagittarius?
Eevee, for sure.
One word to describe what the Gemini-Sagittarius polarity teaches us.
Local community versus the world.
What animal most connects you to Sag?
Rainbow lorikeet.
Which astrological sign can keep Sagittarius on their toes?
Virgo.
Which astrological sign is Sagittarius most likely to flirt with?
Leo.
If Sagittarius were at a pool party, they'd be most likely to
jump off the diving board and probably belly flop.
You actually just beat Colin's score.
That's fucking right, Colin.
You got 13 in 60 seconds.
Thank you. I'm so proud of myself. I'm also a competitive tennis player as well. Part of the reason why I came home is in very Sag fashion. I ruptured a tendon in my arm playing too competitively. So yes, that's
right. And that's why I asked you to name an iconic Sagittarius tennis player, which is actually the one question that I feel like kind of tripped you up just a little bit. But who did you say for that?
So I said Chris Evert, who I'm pretty sure is 29, and I'll tell you why it tripped me up, because your default should be Billie Jean King. However, she's 29 Scorpio. And so it would be wrong of me to say her. The other options would have been Kiki Burton's or Coco Vandaway, but those are less known, and I wanted to say someone who like people would know. Not just like making up someone's name.
And who is your favorite tennis player?
I mean, Serena Williams, the queen.
Right. And we've talked about her chart before, and she's got some good Virgo energy too.
She has, it's like almost all, with the exception of her rising, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and she's ruled her rising's Taurus. So she's a Libra Taurus, and then she's ruled by Venus and Scorpio. And as someone with 0 degrees Venus and Scorpio in the 7th house, I bow down to my Venus and Scorpio queen.
Yeah, so tennis, this is interesting. You have so many different offerings and interests, which feels so Sagittarian to me. But I do think of Sagittarius as being connected to physical strength. And so as a competitive recreational tennis player, you exude that Sagittarian spirit. You've also talked about Sagittarius being connected to the thighs and the glutes and the legs and the hamstrings and all of that. I also remember you once did, I think, 3,000 burpees in 30 days.
I did.
Yeah, so you've had a lot of experience with injury too, which I find quite curious, and I'm wondering if this is part of your Jupiter and Virgo square. Is that connection to health, the relationship to your body? What do you feel that with that square with Jupiter and Virgo? And I'd just love to hear you talk about the square, because you also have that series or that conversation that you had, which is taking the scare out of square.
For sure. Yeah. So I think it's also important to note you bring that up because my Jupiter in Virgo is in the sixth house, using a quadrant house system. And so that's what I use. Do you use Placidus or what do you use?
I use Placidus, but I'm also, open.
Same. I have reverence for people who use whole sign. I use Regiomontanus myself. But yeah, just in regards to that, first of all, according to Lehman's book on traditional rulership, the sign of Sagittarius rules sports injuries, which I find very fitting, especially for my 20s. And it definitely, my sun being in Sagittarius in a almost exact square to Jupiter in Virgo, which Virgo itself, a lot of people associate with, I feel like, health, especially given the fact that it rules the intestines, which are so fundamental to like top to bottom health. It being in square with it, I think to me, sometimes like when squares happen, one of two things typically happen. Either the 90-degree angle is very much the two forces running up against them and people tend to overdo things, or it's very much the pulling away action and it's kind of like it's very limiting and they need to overcome that limitation. And I find with Jupiter squares, it's the former, which is very much there's the tendency to overdo. And very much, with me, I have found that the sun in Sag, which is super competitive and loves athletics that are competitive. I'm more of a solo sport guy myself, can have the tendency, especially in sanctioned competition, to overdo it. And I injured myself because I played 12 matches in 3 days. And I won the tournament, which is great. I got that trophy. It was like a dog chasing a bone. But my arm after that was like, was it worth it? Was it worth it? Right. It's been 2 years since that happened, and I had surgery this year because of that. So I think, it really does speak to learning to, like, squares are very much things you need to refine over time. And it's like channeling that zealous energy I have for competition that's super playful and super fun, but in learning how to wrangle it in and not allowing it to like dominate or like be the overarching thing, because it can't. I will sacrifice my physical body for the spirit of competition.
Yeah. So you, just to kind of reflect back, I think you broke down the squares in two different ways, and one where you used your hands, which I thought was cool, so I'm going to use them too, but you made the 90-degree angles with your hands and you kind of had them like grinding towards each other,
right?
Which was that the overdoing?
So yes, that would be like overdoing. And like one thing that I recommend people do to really experience a square is to have like place one hand, which is very much completely up and down, right? So it would be very much like half of a prayer hand, if you will. And then you balance the middle of the other hand at a perpendicular 90-degree angle, and you can feel the tension there. You can feel them, just gravity alone, but tension is a useful condition, right? Tension turns carbon into diamonds, and all of our houses are built on tense 90-degree angles. So squares are very useful in the sense that tension does typically breed sort of unlocking potential or power, if you will, but they're typically, learned especially pre-Saturn return or experienced through pain or stress.
So that was the first one, but then you also did this aspect where you kind of like expanded them out.
Well, I kind of like pulled away from each other, right? Just to demonstrate that, especially when Saturn is involved in a square, it's kind of the opposite of Jupiter, where instead of overdoing it, there's this feeling of doubt, or there's this feeling of not enough, or I won't be good enough, using the other planetary keyword. So if we're taking Venus square Saturn, like not worthy enough, would be very much a thing that Venus square Saturn people struggle with, especially pre-Saturn return, before they sort of confront their perceived limitations from the Saturn return and really can progress from the secondary progress chart to a sextile.
Really, really fascinating. So what do you think it is with Virgo that Virgo teaches Sagittarius in that square?
So if you think about, I view Virgo as like the most disciplined, and also it's so mercurial in the sense that there's a lot of analysis and paying attention to detail. And if you think about sort of the situation I described, I was feeling my arm throughout those 12 matches, right? And if I like paused and actually paid attention to what was right in front of me and like the fine details that I was feeling in my arm, I would know like, oh, there's tendon fibers that are probably actually fraying right now as I'm competing in this tournament. But Sag being so like not only high mind, but so Jupiter ruled in the sense that it's all about like the vision to the horizon, if you will, so focused on that goal, that lofty goal all the way 3 days later that I got to, I was unwilling to look at the real fiber of my being in front of me that was fraying. And I feel like that's what Virgo does for Sag. And I always say that if I ever take another bachelor trip, I went on one bachelor trip and it was during a Sag full moon, and I like lost my mind and did like a lot of things that I regret or like that are not very much in my normal, you know, I'm typically a pretty buttoned up kind of guy, but I was in Paris alone, and I like was turning on the apps and I was like, you know, doing a lot of like world travel, if you will, like a Sagittarius does. And I feel like I need a Virgo chaperone the next time I take an international vacation alone, because they'd be very much about like channeling my enthusiasm, but in a framework that I won't, you know, do anything I regret or hurt myself.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, you've also had this Pisces rising, which is another square here. So what is the other side of this spectrum? What does Pisces teach Sagittarius? And I think just to bring it back to the current transits, Neptune's in Pisces right now, making a square to this nodal axis too. So we could also maybe talk a little bit about what that might mean for us.
Well, first of all, I've been living in fog for the last like 4 years.
Yeah.
With Neptune just squaring my planets and the midpoints and everything for sure. But, you know, I think what Pisces teaches Sagittarius, it's interesting because I feel like Pisces and Sag have so much more in common. I don't know, in my mind, maybe it's because I am a double Sag Pisces rising. And just to me, it makes more sense. But, you know, Pisces being Jupiter ruled also, it's kind of the other side of Jupiter, right? Which would be, and from the traditional standpoint, I recognize there's people listening who use Neptune as the ruler, and that's awesome. Great for you. Like totally do that. We'll say
traditionally speaking, Jupiter is the traditional ruling planet for Pisces.
Totally. Yeah. And so in my mind, like Jupiter has two sides to it too, which is very much all about beliefs and conviction, you know, and then there's that growth and expansion piece as well. And I feel like Sag really embodies the growth and expansion piece, and we get to higher mind with it. But then I associate Pisces with like spirit, honey, like just complete spirit, right? And from the traditional standpoint, it stops at Saturn. So who's really all about that spirit, right? And that would be Jupiter. I think that with spirit, Neptune is like formless spirit, and then Jupiter is spirit with form to it, which is why religion would go under the jurisdiction of Jupiter. And I just feel like innate spirituality goes under Neptune.
Okay. So it's that intersection of religion and spirituality.
Yes, definitely.
Beautiful. I love that. It's making what's coming to mind right now. And often when I will talk about and tune into the signs, I remember the Zodiac Queens project that the Cosmic Cousins worked on, the Cosmic Cousins community worked on. And Tina Turner's Queen of Sagittarius. And so when thinking of her coming in a square with Beyonce, Queen of Virgo, there is like an emphasis to me on the physicality of Sagittarius. I mean, Tina Turner is very physical. And so when thinking of her coming in a square with Beyonce, Queen of Virgo, there is like an emphasis to me on the physicality of Sagittarius. I mean, Tina Turner is very physical. And thinking of her hanging out with Beyonce, like I imagine if they performed together, it would be like really like attention to the detail of the dance and like, you know, so that's interesting. But then when we think of Pisces, this is Nina Simone, and thinking of Tina Turner performing with Nina Simone, it would be so emotional, and it would be much more connected to Tina Turner's spirituality, which she very much had. So thinking of those three queens is really cool. And actually all four of the mutable queens, Stevie Nicks being Gemini, were the singers. And they're
Yeah,
the four singers of the zodiac wheel. The other ones are not. So
that's so
there's something
cool.
with a mutable quality that does connect us to music and maybe storytelling and performance. So that's making me think of music. I know I asked you, who is your favorite Sagittarian musician? Was that one of the
Yeah, that's the
questions?
question.
Who did you say?
I said Amy Lee, who's the lead singer of Evanescence and whose lyrics I have tattooed to my ribs.
Okay. What are the lyrics?
In this short life, there's no time to waste on giving up.
In this short life, there's no time to waste on giving up.
And
Which
does
for
that feel
Evanescence-
reflective of Sag to you?
Yeah, I mean, that is such a Sag lyric. And like what I spoke about with mutable energy before my printer started acting up, which was very much about that resilience piece, I think, that the mutability and the adaptability provides it. And yeah, it to me also for her, you know, just knowing what the history of her music is and the lyricism involved in that, like it is a very hopeful bridge for an Evanescence song, which is very much about like going under and like struggling with like existential dread and depression and abuse and other things, right? And you know, it was in her second record. If you take like the records from Fallen onwards, which is early on in her development as a musician, but you can still kind of see the Sag optimism kind of like can't be held down in sort of the dreary, or I would say more so the emotional Cancer rising that she is.
Okay, which is cool because you got it on the ribs, which is Cancer's part of the
There you go.
body.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about Sagittarius being religion, and I wanted to say to you, Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you. Happy holidays and almost solstice.
Yeah. So what is your relationship to religion as a Sagittarius?
Oi. You know, and just saying oi alone, I feel like is, you know, demonstrating that it's always very much part of myself. I feel like my Pisces rising is very much like, is the part where it's like, I want the individual like connection to the universe, to God, to the Almighty, Hashem, whatever. And I actually distinctly remember when I was 16, I got into an argument with a rabbi at Hebrew school. I was going to Hebrew school post my bar mitzvah, which is, you know, not every American Jew does that, but invested in it, you know, double Sag, of course. But he was so rigid in his interpretation of things and in like what was expected. And I remember I decided I wanted to only go to 3 hours and not 4. And he called me out and embarrassed me in front of the whole class, essentially, which like you don't do to anyone, but nonetheless, a Sag fire sign in the realm of like structuring religion and spirituality. And I am normally very deferential to authority figures. I was very much trained to be like the teacher's pet, and I blew up back at him. It was not a pretty sight. I left that day and I never returned.
Wow.
And it took me like 4 years until the director of my college, Hillel, like really saw something in me and like brought me in, and I developed a very individual and modern relationship to Judaism. I was raised in a conservative Jewish household, which would be like centrist if we're using the American political system. And I am very much like democratic socialist Jew if we're using the American political system. It's called Jewish renewalist, and very much is, it's very interfaith in the sense that they, you know, there's a deep found belief that no one is the chosen people and that we can all learn from each other. The rabbi who founded it was also ordained as a sheik and had mentors who were Native American shamans and pastors. And to me, that just speaks to like the true tenet of most religions are like love and respect and like living your most high-minded self. And that's what I get out of Judaism, and not the
Right.
order and the structure and the other stuff.
Well, yeah, this to me feels like the evolving expression of Sagittarius, which when I think of Sagittarius, I think of a wheel in the sky. And on that wheel, there's each spoke is a different philosophy or religion. And Sagittarius, the archer, is aiming at the center of the wheel, which is truth that dispels the illusion of separation of religion. So in a lower form, Sagittarius can be the bigot who's really ignorant and has a closed mind to other people's worldviews, maybe because they haven't traveled the world. But as Sagittarius expands beyond what they know to be true and experiences other perspectives, other cultures, other religions, they start to realize that we're all united in our beliefs. And so Sagittarius then is the one that builds bridges of the religions of the world's philosophies of the worlds. And so even hearing that, the incorporation of Native American shamanism, to me, that feels very Sagittarian. And you also mentioned the word mentor, which I think of Sagittarius as the great mentor as well. And this is also going to connect us to the higher mind of Sagittarius and the connection to, universities and, degrees and things like that, which is something that's also been a part of your life too. You have a really well-rounded educational background, which includes a bachelor's in environmental science, focusing on honeybee research from Franklin and Marshall College. And you also have a master's degree in university management and student affairs from USC. So I asked you if Sagittarius were a PhD program, what would Sagittarius be? And what did you say?
I said literally what I got my master's in.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's so many of these different vast themes, and you have, the connection to religion, the connection to higher education. You're also an astrologer. And how do these inform each other? And do you see yourself building bridges between these different communities and parts of your life?
Yeah, I love that you bring up low vibe Sag, because it is important to note that, to me, low vibe Sag isn't only the bigot, but it's the witch burner. Which, like, to me, as being someone in the woo-woo community, is like really rough to admit, but it is very true. Sag is the preacher and the teacher, and what's shadow preacher would be the witch burner for sure. I always go back to the root of the word Sagittarius, which is, I don't speak Latin, so this is going to not sound Latin to you, but it's Sagire or something.
Okay.
It means to seek.
Okay.
And to me, it, like, what you're describing here is like, I have kind of like lived multiple lives, and like but it's always been from the realm of seeking, right? And seeking my truth and seeking what fits. And through that seeking, I can now build bridges between all of those different lives that I've kind of lived up until my first Saturn return. Like, I was going to be an entomologist. I did really do hardcore honeybee research where I trained my bees to avoid herbicides in the height of colony collapse disorder. Turns out I'm allergic to bees. So
Wow.
that is kind of why I did not become an entomologist and study bees, because I am allergic. I didn't find that out until I tripped on a root and almost knocked my hive over. When I was surrounded by a twister of honeybees, like 5,000 bees around me is what I was working with. Only one stung me because they loved me. And I think that my guardian angels were looking out for me.
Okay.
And then, I can basically, that helped me go into the classroom as well. And when I was teaching second grade before I got to higher ed, I definitely had an environmental lens to, like, the children are the future, and really sort of emphasize to them the importance of environmental movements and climate change and stuff. And then that my experience in the classroom led me to understanding the connection between early education and how that creates a separation and access and equity to higher education. So just like I'm saying, like, when I would go about seeking something new and seeking my calling, the first thing would always be the bridge to the next thing, if that made sense. So it all flowed one into the other. And I think there's that beautiful mutable fire that really sort of lights the way, if you will.
Yeah. And this living of many different lives in a lifetime feels quite Sagittarian to me. And I think that takes a certain sense of humor, for sure, which I associate with Sagittarius. And you're also a stand-up comedian, and you do improv.
I do, yes.
And I asked you which Sagittarius comedian you most admire. And I believe you said Margaret Cho.
I did, yes. The comedian who inspired me to get involved, like to become a stand-up. One of the two, I would say.
One of the first jobs I ever had as a stand-up comedian was working on a lesbian cruise. I was the ship comedian on the lesbian love boat. It was Olivia Cruises. They do cruises for women all over the world, and I went with them to Alaska because lesbians love whale watching.
Okay, what about Margaret Cho do you think reflects Sagittarius?
Whew. Well, first of all, I do have to say that she is one of the first visible stand-ups to really like embody the gay niche, right? Like she said, like she said in her 2001 special, I'm the one that I want. Like, this is for the gays, right? Like, I'm doing this 90-minute or 1 hour show or whatever, like for the gay community, which like really wasn't a thing before. And especially being in multiple marginalized communities, because she is a woman and a woman of color herself in the stand-up world, which is a very white male dominated space, for her to be so courageous and to be so aligned to like what her truth is in regards to her value system, which is like, she was raised by the gay community on Polk Street in San Francisco. And so what she's doing is giving back to her people. She herself is a bisexual woman, from my understanding. And to me, like, that really speaks high-minded Sag, which is like, this is her truth. She doesn't care whose feathers are ruffled by it. Like, she's being her authentic self and speaking to her people. And I do have to say that with some of my bar mitzvah money at like 13, the first purchase that I bought, it was like old school Amazon. I sneaked down to my family computer and I bought Margaret Cho's special from 2001, and changed my life for sure. So she is always like, she and Kathy Griffin, who's a Scorpio, those two definitely have a special place in my heart.
Was that a CD or a DVD?
It was a DVD. And I had, remember like in the mid 2000s, we had the portable DVD player, like give kids on car rides and stuff.
Totally.
I like would like be in my room and I'd be like watching it. I'd understand like half of the jokes because it was like very explicit. Like, she does not beat around the bush, pun intended there.
Mm-hmm.
And like laughed at everything, even though I think I only understood half of it.
Yeah.
But I felt very seen.
Yeah. It was fun to look back on those things that you're like, well, I was listening to this when I was 13.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So I like that you're bringing in the gays here. And so as a Sagittarius astrologer who identifies as gay, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. Like, how do you think that really forms your offering as an astrologer? And do you seek to connect more with the gay community in the astrology world? Is that part of your practice with astrology?
It's a good question. I mean, I am based in West Hollywood, which per capita has like the most gay people, I think, per capita or something for a city.
In the world or in the US?
I think it's in the US. I don't want to misspeak. But Sag does speak in hyperbole, so let's go for it.
It's gay Disney World, let's be real.
It really is gay Disney World, for sure. I definitely think that my lens as a gay astrologer, there's an intersectionality that impacts both parts of that, right? So when I'm the astrologer being a gay astrologer, I feel like I try to make a concerted effort to not interpret the traditional gender norms that were thrust upon planets and thrust upon specific astrological themes, which I don't think are relevant. Like, for example, like men are from Mars and women are from Venus, right? Like, no. I can't elaborate beyond just no. I don't ascribe to that or subscribe to that by any means. I really try to get to the soul of the planet, if you will, and those themes apply to anyone regardless of gender or orientation, right? So I think that that's how it informs from the astrology lens. I will say, me being an astrologer in the gay world is also interesting because there's a lot of misinformation too, I feel like, from like pop astrology, which has its place for sure, and I also participate in that a little bit. And it is interesting how navigating dating circumstances, I make a concerted effort not to see a chart because I feel like I'm going to get in my head if I see a chart. And I recommend to anyone listening to this, I imagine that you have a level of astrological knowledge to you. I really recommend not looking at someone you're dating's chart for at least like a bit, right? Like
Right.
get to know the person. And then like, if you want to do a guessing game in your head every once in a while, that's fine. But really let the chart reveal themselves before like getting that birth time.
Yeah.
And trust me, getting a birth time turns me on. Don't get me wrong. But like, there is a time and a place for it, and get to know the person before you get to know the chart. So it kind of works twofold.
You have that rule. I think you told me once that when you're dating someone, you won't ask them their birth time.
Right.
What astrological sign is Sag most likely to flirt with?
I think I said Leo, but if remember, I was in a competitive mindset right there.
I know. I can't remember either because I'm like asking the questions and you answer them so quickly.
Definitely said Leo, just because it was the first thing that came to my head. But if I'm being totally honest with you and using myself as an example of this, when I first came out, and I came out kind of late, I came out at 20, I guess, which is like late for now, right?
Right.
I had this thing where I was like surrounded by older Capricorns for like my very early 20s, like 20 to 24, I want to say. And like my biggest turn on to me or thing was like to both like try to flirt and like to try to get them to crack a smile, since like none of these daddy Capricorn Saturn guys would like crack a smile. And for me, I was just this like goofy little Sagittarian twink. And like really just like my go-to thing was to like do a combination of like flirt and comedy with them to try to make them crack a smile. And if I did that, I'd like fist pump a little bit to myself, be like, yeah. So I would say Capricorn, actually.
Okay, interesting. And which sign did you said Virgo keeps Sag on the toes, right?
Yes, I think earth signs in general for Sagittarius, there is very good because they will put some sort of leash harness on the Sag, which Sag actually does crave. Sag would crave a leash harness situation to, sometimes we can kind of be a little too mutable or spiral a little too much. And, we need that structure that an earth sign can provide.
Yeah. I think for me as an Aquarius, I think Aquarius is most likely to flirt with the other fire signs. And we're coming into some pretty heavy Aquarian energy.
We are.
And Saturn and Jupiter are both entering Aquarius in about, I guess, 10 days or so at this point.
Yeah.
And by the time this episode airs, it will be the Sagittarius new moon, and it will just be in the week that follows. Any thoughts that you can share with us about this transition into this Aquarian energy?
Yeah. Like I mentioned before, and just want to elaborate upon, is like, we can't be anticipating this is going to be Hair immediately, like the musical Hair, right?
And I think you were actually saying that before we started recording too. So.
Oh, great. So then no one heard it, and here we are, right? So let me just say, we can't anticipate the Great Conjunction is all of a sudden going to usher in a nationwide global flash mob of the age of Aquarius from the musical Hair, which like I would love if that happened. I'd participate even though it's coronavirus times. And stay safe, follow CDC guidelines. But to me, I think it speaks to, in order to anticipate what's going to happen, astrology is all about cycles. So like, let's go back to the last time Saturn was in Aquarius, which is, when I was born, 91 to 94. And to me, a few things stick out. The first of which is the internet, and kind of like the dawning of a new technological age. I will, of course, recognize that Uranus and Neptune were conjunct during this time as well, which also very much factors into that happening.
Sure.
But I do think Saturn and Aquarius, the structure of our society was permanently influenced by the technological innovations that Saturn and Aquarius brought. And I wake up every morning and I will fully admit that the first thing I look at is my phone. It's my ceiling and then my phone, probably. Like that's probably the order, right? But This is a very new way of living. And I do think that Saturn and Aquarius is going to usher in kind of the extension or like the next wave of like where we go from here in regards to humankind's reliance on technology and how it really is woven into the fabric of society.
And how about Jupiter hanging out there with Saturn this time around?
Right. Jupiter is buzzing through. I think it's important to know that Jupiter is going 70 and a 55 in Aquarius.
It's true.
In
Yeah.
a month, right? Which Jupiter, of course, I can imagine driving a fast car. Don't get me wrong, especially Jupiter in Sag, or Jupiter in a fire sign or an air sign, I guess. But
And it's like an SUV because it's Jupiter, so it's a little bit bigger, which is
it's an Escalade for sure.
Yes.
It's an Escalade specifically.
Mhm.
Tinted windows, I imagine.
What color?
I see it honestly as black, but like it has rims. I'm just imagining a very like extravagant kind of vehicle.
Mhm. And maybe
You know what I
it's like black with a bit of like sparkle in it with this Aquarian galactic feel.
I love that. You know how they like can have the paint with the sparkle in it?
Yes,
That's
exactly.
exactly. It's like black with sparkle for sure. And yeah, I do think that Jupiter in Aquarius, it's going very quickly, but it's gonna really it's gonna provide that momentum, I think, from the get-go and really catalyze it. To me, where Jupiter in Aquarius falls in your chart really speaks to not only the theme of growth and expansion in that sphere of life, but the need to innovate and iterate upon what you're already doing with wherever it falls for you. So it's important to look at your own chart and see where the great conjunction is happening and see where Jupiter is hanging out for next year, because it really speaks to substantial iteration and doing things differently for that forward momentum to occur.
Yeah, the last time Jupiter was in Aquarius was right when Barack Obama was inaugurated as president in 2008,
I love that.
which I think is interesting to look back at, considering that now Biden will be inaugurated in January. Biden is a little bit more Saturnian feeling too.
He's old too.
He's the oldest president that we'll ever have.
Right.
Yeah. So just reflecting that. And, in this car that's going really fast, I'm now picturing Oprah, Queen of Aquarius, driving it.
Yes.
Taking us into the future. And here we are. And so this is the last Sagittarius new moon, the last new moon before the Great Conjunction. Any thoughts on the new moon as we come to the end of our convo here?
For sure. So for me, I think it's important, whenever I look at eclipse charts, I take a look at how close the lunation is to the nodes. And this is co-present with the south node within 4 degrees. So that is a high-powered eclipse, especially if it's hitting a natal point in your chart, whether it's an angle or a planet. For me, given that it's co-present with the south node, the eclipse themes of shedding and of separating in order to usher in the new is especially pertinent and especially potent here. So I do think it is really a time of shedding, even though we associate new moons with like new beginnings or the budding period, or like ushering in the budding period. But to me, a new moon eclipse is like what really needs to be severed in order to have enough fertile space to, plant something new and to like have anything bud. I associate eclipses with typical times of breakup of some capacity, whether it's breakups with a self-effacing pattern of thought or behavior, or with some sort of way in which you navigate life, or a partnership, or whatever it may be. And it's important to view those to honor what that was, but also recognize like this needs to fade in order to usher in something new.
Mm-hmm. And with it being in Sagittarius, it could also connect us to certain beliefs that might be limiting. That's one thing that I'm thinking of right now, is how have I been limiting myself, and I'm letting that stuff go. So for this Sagittarius new moon, I'm actually going to just be writing down outdated beliefs that no longer serve me, and I'll likely light it on fire.
That's, shedding those beliefs, right, in order to usher in a newfound belief system is very Sag new moon eclipse for sure.
Yes. And so thank you so much for being with us on Cosmic Cousins today. As we go into this other side, we're wishing for you a lot of expansion and growth. You have created a new Instagram account that is specifically focused on your astrology. What inspired that for you?
And the lunation we just discussed definitely was a big impetus for it. I may have mentioned, but it hits my moon midheaven midpoint. And so for me, with the moon representing emotional security and the midheaven representing my legacy and what I really put out into the world, I've always been afraid to speak up and to speak up in the grand public because my Pisces rising, I'm a delicate flower. Okay, I am a delicate flower as a Pisces rising for sure. And I realized like I do have a voice and I do have a message to share, and I am more resilient than I think, really tapping into that mutable energy as well. And that really was a big impetus for it. I elected a chart. I wanted it to be 0 degrees Aquarius rising, but it is 1 degree because Instagram was farting on me. And unfortunately, it's 1 degree. But nonetheless, I feel like it's very much in line with the times in our recent discussion in regards to like the Aquarian energy that we're walking into. It's my brand of it. So it's going to be a combination of doing what Sag does best, which is teaching and preaching, but it's also going to be a little humorous too. I just posted like a what Pokemon would you be based on your sun sign. I did it for Virgo, but the rest are on my YouTube page. But it's at LYT_astrology, which is Live Your Truth Astrology, of course.
And I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Thank
and
you.
I did just watch last night the Pokemon series that you did, which is why I asked you what Pokemon do you most connect to Sagittarius. Maybe you tell us just a little bit about that Pokemon and why Pokemon. Is this something that you watch or? Yeah.
I mean, very much 2020. I feel like not only me, but a lot of us have been doing inner child work and like connecting to our inner child for sure. And I will say that I posted that in December of last year, but this year I have gone back and watched like gone down memory lane and like watched a bunch of the stuff that I watched as a child just to like see it from an adult lens. And it inspired me to repost that. And to me, something about that Pokemon in particular, which is Eevee, is Eevee can evolve into many different types of Pokemon, not just the only one that it's expected to evolve in. And in the anime, Eevee decides not to evolve at all because Eevee's truth is just being an Eevee. And I'm getting verklempt because Eevee is such a Sagittarius and I just love Eevee so much.
Oh. I love that so much. I never watched Pokemon, so it was really fascinating to learn about the different Pokemon through the lens of astrology, and it still captivated me because I just am an astrology nerd, so I was just like really interested in it. But I will say the one Pokemon that I was like, I don't know how I feel about this one was Aquarius.
Okay, what did I give Aquarius again? Remind me.
It's the one, it has like a bill. It's like a duck.
Oh, Psyduck. Yeah, Psyduck, for sure. Yeah, Psyduck is the underrated hero, like the underrated hero of the Pokemon world for sure, and is typically viewed as like super eccentric and left of center. But Psyduck is always just ahead of its times. Like ahead of the times, very much. It's a psychic Pokemon as well, and people don't know it's a psychic Pokemon. So that was why I gave it. But what with you resonated like you weren't so sure?
I think the confusion. I think of my Mercury and Pisces as like when I'm feeling confused, but Aquarius I don't really think of as confusion as much. So I did a little Google search of Pokemon, and the one that I like for Aquarius is Zebstrika.
That's some new Pokemon. I'm dealing with Gen 1 here.
Okay.
But how do you...
It's like a zebra Pokemon that shoots lightning. It like fires lightning bolts from its mane and can move as quickly as lightning, and it releases like thunderclaps at a full gallop.
I see exactly what you mean by that. And to me, what Zebstrika represents, and I recommend everyone Google Zebstrika, after this, is like, to me, like Sag and Aquarius really do mesh super well. And to me, this seems like how Sag evolves into Aquarius in the story of the Zodiac. So I get that.
Yeah.
Love the star.
I think is important for us right now as we're, here in this Sagittarian portal eclipse and getting ready for Aquarius. So I'm definitely thinking of Zebstrika right now.
Yeah, you are quite the Zebstrika.
Thank you. And if anyone was wanting to work with you, are you offering astrology readings right now?
I am open for bookings. Definitely go to my website, which is liveyourtruthLars.com. I'm so happy I got that domain name. You could also follow me on YouTube. I post pretty regularly. I do my square series for the most part, so taking the scare out of the square, in which we go through every natal square, myself and my co-host Rachel Lang, Astrologer at Instagram. She's incredible.
You said you go through every square?
That's our plan for sure.
Oh,
And
okay.
we've been
Planet squares or sign squares or all of the above?
it's planetary squares. Yeah. So you know, I think that it would be difficult to just do planet and sign, or like do sign squares,
Right.
because of the importance of the planet in like the house it's
Gotcha.
in. But we've done a fair amount of them. I also do astro weather reports for the month. I think that it's just better to do that general astro weather report where I can encapsulate the like potency of the transit versus like, here's the month ahead for X rising sign. And like, maybe I'll do that one day, but currently, if you want me, you know, if you want to hear the weather for the month, check me out there for sure.
I'm excited to hear what you have to say about Uranus square Jupiter, or Jupiter square Uranus.
Oh,
I have that in my chart.
We're going to be doing the outer planet ones very soon. And Uranus is the least amount of activity, so we're definitely focused on Uranus. Also, we'll be posting little bite size at LYT_astrology, which is my astrology page on Instagram. So definitely be on the alert there for more square stuff too.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lars. And also happy belated solar return to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was such a sweet day. And happy solar return to any other Sagittarius listening.
Yes, it's really cool to celebrate you in this way. And again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm such a fan and so inspired by you. And it's an honor to be here.
Boom, boom, boom. Well, that was such a great conversation with Lars. I really enjoyed that, and thank you for sticking around and tuning into the show. As always, Cosmic Cousins, thank you for being here, and a very special shout out to all of the Patreon members who make a monthly contribution to the show that make the show possible for all of us to listen to and enjoy. And so, yes, if you are a Patreon member, thank you so much. And to those of you who would like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/Cosmic Cousins to make a monthly contribution to the show. If you're looking for support with an astrology reading, I do offer 2-hour deep dive astrology readings. CosmicCousins.com will give you more information for that. And I'm wishing for all of you a very gentle and nourishing Sagittarius new moon, sacred realignments for us all at this time, releasing what no longer supports us in this year 2020 as we head into a very Aquarian year in 2021. So I'm sending you all love, and take sweet care, cousins, and remember, deep breaths.